So you're back with myself, Kaz or Kazi from Property by Kazi, and today we're doing another day.
Welcome back. I am fresh off the plane, straight home and straight back to work. So hope you appreciate it. We are back for another episode of Ask Somebody Else. Like always, we have an amazing guest that we have on each and every week where you will get to ask your questions to an established property developer or property professional within a specific field. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow the page. If you do have any questions, try and use the question box. Everybody can ask them. I'm going to try and get my guest added in. But in the meantime, while we are adding in the guests, let me know where you're all coming from. Like, where are you finding us from? Where are you joining us from today? Are you, where you coming from? Is it London? Is it Birmingham? Is it Scotland? Is it Glasgow? Where are we finding you from? So let's wait for our guest to come on. Let me make sure I get his at right while I send him the invite. Okay, I've just sent the invite over. So we're seeing some Manchester, some Birmingham, Essex, no London. We don't have any London in the building, Wolverhampton. Okay, South London, we appreciate you. Let me send the invite again, 1 second to Stephen while we're waiting. But I think whilst I'm waiting, so our guest today is going to be Stephen Clark. He previously worked in offshore oil and then since become a multi-million-pound property investor. We're going to fill some guys. Okay, we got the Londoners slowly filtering through. I feel like the Londoners like to turn up a little bit late. Kent, Cornwall. And how is everybody's property investment going? Like, how is it going in the areas that you're operating in? What have you been focusing on? Let's talk about our BRRR gang. Let's talk about our rent-to-rents, people that are doing flips. How's it going? Has anybody sourced their deal within the last month? If you have, just spam the chat with deal. Stephen, if you're trying to join, just make sure that your Instagram is the latest version, or you are going to struggle to join if it's not the latest version. I'm going to try and accept you again now, but you do have to make sure you've got the latest version of Instagram. So there's not any issues allowing you to join. If not, you'll have to leave the chat. Oh, there we go.
Hi, buddy. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. I was worried we weren't going to get you on.
I saw the request come through the other Instagram page on the Scottish Property Podcast one there.
Oh, okay. It came through there.
Yeah. How's things? Where were you on holiday?
I was in Dubai. So I was in Dubai for what was supposed to be a couple of days and ended up being a couple of weeks. So back now, fresh off the plane, but it's time to just get back to work. How have you been?
Good, yeah. Just got back from Cyprus a few days ago as well. So
nice.
Just into reality.
Exactly. So for those that don't know you, do you want to give the people an introduction into who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Stephen Clark, and I got started in property about 2006. I had something of a kind of obsession with property from a young age. So the minute I could afford to get on the property ladder, I did. Now up in Scotland, that wasn't such a huge task back then. The first flat I bought was 58,000, and to get a 5% deposit wasn't that hard. So, but I've always been quite creative. I don't have none of more money, and the first time wasn't any different. So back then, obviously, you could do kind of a bit more creative stuff for the mortgages at the time, which was a lot easier. Because I negotiated 5% off the purchase price of the property, I didn't have to put them in deposit, so it was quite easy. But I was only a second year apprentice in engineering on £4 an hour. Just the minute I was able to kind of secure a job enough to just kind of get on the ladder, I worked on the ladder and I ripped out the property, added value, done a bit of layout change, just learn't on the job. Friends that were in the trades, my dad teaching me skills and stuff like that. And and then you rock up at the bank 6 months later, and the price index in the Bank of Scotland was saying, "Oh, your property values went up £28,000. Do you want to release some equity?" And I'm like, "Well, 20-year-old, I'm ready to go to Ibiza for my 21st. Of course, I'm going to pull out some equity here, and I'll buy another property, obviously." But so I pulled out money and bought a 3-bed ex-local authority semi-detached house, and then 2008 come kind of crashing down. So So yeah, my start to property was quite a bumpy start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you, what was the, because you said you were able to pull out 28,000. So when did you buy your first property? In what year?
So that was 2006, and I fully
2000.
renovated it. Yeah.
Fast forward to by 2008, you had two properties by the sort of that the most recent large crash in the property market. And what impact did that have on your values at the time?
It was big. It was big, and some areas have recovered really, really well. Some affluent areas, some are probably just coming back to where they were back
Mhm.
then. But yeah, yeah, it was a hard thought to swallow. You know, at 21, you stepped out from the circles around you to not only buy one property but then refinance it and pull out and buy another property, thinking that, oh yeah, here we go, you get a bit full of yourself, right? Okay, I'm gonna be like, kind of grow this portfolio, and
Mhm.
then boom, straight away negative equity and both of them really
Oh
within
wow.
months. Yeah,
Wow, wow, wow. So that's big, big impact. And I think that is obviously, the truth behind property. And it's just that any investment that there's an element of risk. And obviously you can do everything right and you can do a good refurb, but you can always be sort of subject to market forces. So I think everybody that is looking to invest, it's always important to make sure you understand that with any investment, there's an element of risk as well.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It's something that potentially isn't spoken about enough. So whereabouts did you invest? Where in Scotland did you buy your first property?
So that one was just over the bridge from Edinburgh. It was just in Fife where I'm based. Um, so yeah, it was just a one bedroom flat. You know, decent commuter links to Edinburgh. So you thought I was kind of playing it safe with the area location that I was buying, but nothing was kind of stopping the financial crash coming.
Yeah. So then I think one thing, because I wanted to ask you about, the difference, because a lot of people now, particularly with social media, from an investment perspective, we're not just looking locally. A lot of people are not only looking nationally, but looking all over the UK for investment opportunities, particularly when looking at Scotland, because it's Edinburgh and Glasgow have been in the top 10 of the yields, the rental yield calculators for probably the last 5 or 6 years. When you
Yeah.
look sort of comparatively, how have you found the yield from somebody who operates in the area?
Um, yeah, I mean, I suppose speaking of investing remotely, my area is very much the kind of commuter
Mhm.
towns that, well, Dunfermline, where I'm actually from, just got announced the Jubilee, city awarded the city status actually from the Queen's Jubilee this weekend or whenever it's coming up. So yeah, I'm right on the outskirts of Edinburgh, and that that saw the influx and the kind of growth period the last 5 years, 6 years. The market's been very hot, very buoyant, a lot of activity, a lot of things going well over the asking price. So my investment area actually changed to north of Aberdeen, north of Scotland, which was Aberdeen.
Okay.
So oil and gas capital of Europe. I knew the city well, worked in the area, but I mean it's still a couple of hours away from me. So yeah, I was very much the same. Like looking at the areas that you were, and particularly like you'll be the same with looking at it in London. You start thinking, shit, it's an investment class, an asset class. Go to wherever it makes sense, wherever the deals work for your criteria. So yeah, I've been doing exactly the same, but still within Scotland. But
And are there any ways that you could highlight for somebody that's like an expert within the area, that's been operating the area for a long time, that property laws differ between potentially like the UK, I'm sorry, the England and Scottish market?
mhm. There's not a huge difference. The conveyancing laws are apparently a little bit different, but I don't. I think there's a couple of changes from what I know. Obviously, all the we buy is freeholds
Mhm.
in Scotland. That's probably the biggest difference from what I think. The other thing is we're not concluded in contract until missives are signed. Like it's usually a couple of days before the sale goes through. So up
Mhm.
until then, you're not in contract. I don't know if that differs in England.
I
Um,
mean, yeah, technically you're not tied in until you exchange in England. So
yeah.
until you exchange, you could pull out of the sale and
Mhm.
not have any sort of financial implication. So that element is similar. I think the other reason I asked is because you hear a lot of people that do coaching and talking about investing in multiple different areas, but then I also thought I wanted to ask the question that how do you feel as a proud Scotsman when you see people from down south coming to invest? Are you welcoming them, or are you saying, look,
This is my
No,
turf.
no, yeah, absolutely. No, I love it. I think it's great. You know, and there is a lot of beautiful areas in Scotland to invest in. There's a lot of investment in the different cities and different areas, and you know, a lot of them offer different things. But I suppose it's like anywhere. You have to know the local
Mm.
areas and what you're investing in, and each city's got a different demographics and different streets, and so yeah, you kind of have to be quite wary. But yeah, I love it when people come up and invest in Scotland. I think it's quite cool.
That's good. That's good. Because I think it's important to understand even just the slight, you know, local, like whether it's down to legislation or whether it's down to like the slight different sort of cultural nuances of working and operating in an area. Because I remember at a point when I was doing rent to rent, and I was helping a friend of mine who was hoping to do it in Glasgow actually, and in England basically you can apply under the Freedom of Information Act that, you know, they have to give you the list of all of the HMO owners in the area.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't actually translate in the same way in Scotland. So we were writing to them saying, yeah, can we get under Freedom of Information? They just said no.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, you know, if you are gonna, the reason I mention it is if you are gonna branch out to operate in an area and you see one of these lists and you say, look, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee, wherever the case may be, is a hot area to invest in, you know, the fact that it can't just be just a numbers game like, oh, the yield looks really good. Because like you said, you need to understand the difference between the good roads and the bad roads and the ones that are the right commuter belt and aren't. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely, and what the city has to offer as well. Like, I mean, like you touched on Dundee there. Dundee's had a huge investment in the last 5 or 6 years with the VA and the kind of the city centre development of the city key. So, you know, understanding you know what work, what industries around, what you know, like engineering companies are there, or if Amazon's got a base nearby. It's like it's interesting to know, you know, what makes the city or that town tick. You know, what are the big employers of the area? Because you know, in these smaller cities, it could just be a handful of big employers, and if you think that something's, you know, going to go good or bad with that industry, it's worth then taking that into consideration, that in your investment criteria, and saying, oh, I better hold off in here because you know that factory is going to get closed down. There's thousands of jobs at risk, and that's going to definitely affect the demographics of the city. So yeah, definitely.
Nice. So now when I was looking at, obviously just looking at what it is that you do exactly and what you've built up over the time, see, despite the fact that there was the financial crash that you were negatively impacted in, so 2007, 2008, you've now said you've built up a seven-figure property portfolio. How did you go from being in negative equity with two properties to building up a seven-figure portfolio?
So at the time, I kind of licked my wounds a little bit, and because I'd been looking at so much at you know property demographics, like particularly 2 and 3 bed ex local authorities, that was my next step in the ladder of what I wanted to buy. And there was a guy that was at my work, and I remember on night shift, he was flicking through Rightmove, and I just you know just hit me straight away, like wow, they're really cheap, but this was the repossessions coming on the market after the crash. And I started looking at them and thinking, bloody hell, I know what these were worth like months, you know, literally months ago,
Hmm.
or a year ago. Like it wasn't a huge amount of time. So I convinced my wife, was my girlfriend at the time. I'd only just been started seeing her, and she had no debt at all and stuff. And I said, look, can I put this property in your name? I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna flip it. I'll do X, Y, and Z, and I'll sell it for more. And her exact words were, God, if it was that easy, everyone would be doing it. But you know, it's like the media and scaremongering during hot markets or crashing markets. Everyone was sitting quite timid. So for about 4 or 5 years, I ended up just flipping properties just to build up the cash pot, just to build up. And you know, and through that time, because I was renting the original property and living in another one, I kind of got a taste for buy to let. So a couple I would, if one didn't quite sell for what I wanted or it got overvaluation, I think, well, can I keep that and put a mortgage on that and you know get the cash back out? But certainly the first maybe 5 or 6, it was pretty much deposit on a credit card, no, a lot of the materials on a credit card, and then once you sold one, paid off the debt, you had a little bit of money towards the deposit yourself, but the materials went on a credit card again. Eventually, just kind of built up that cash pot by kind of learning on the job doing it, and then once I got more comfortable with it, I started adding them to the portfolio as well. Um,
I think that's the good thing about flipping, that, you know, obviously you have your exit strategy
yeah,
for whatever reason. If you've done all the hard work and it doesn't necessarily meet the end values, you could potentially look and say, you know what, maybe I'm going to retain this one and refinance. Or if it over exceeds and you say, no, I can actually get all of my money out and it's a lot safer, you have those
have those exit options as well.
Yeah, no,
So
absolutely.
were you
And
still working at this time, or what was the balance between being a property investor slash engineer? Like where was your focus over that?
21, 22 hour days, probably like for that maybe like a 10-year period, and it was between working full time, always had a property flip on the go at any given time, one or two probably more latter stages of this stage.
Mm.
I used to run a mixed martial arts gym and run a mixed martial arts promotion, one of the first ones in Scotland as well. I was busy constantly, just flat out. And then I went offshore in 2012 to then move, transfer up to Aberdeen, work remotely from there, and then went offshore. And the plan was to just try and bank more cash, get more time off to work on the property business, but as I bank more cash, build this portfolio quicker and with a better income.
Nice, nice. And I think that goes to show, obviously, that a lot of the time it does depend how much how much you want it to a degree, how much you're willing to sacrifice in the short term. Because I'm sure when you were sort of, whether it was working full time or working offshore and having to come back and do the property side of things, as well as running another business that you mentioned, you probably
Yeah,
have to sacrifice a lot of nights out, probably a lot of holidays, probably a lot of purchases that maybe friends and family were doing at the time outside of things. But it really depends, like how bad do you want it and what do you want in the short term, which is going to dictate potentially how you're going to grow over the longer term, and those short term sacrifices to aid that long term growth.
yeah, absolutely, mate. You know anyone that builds up a buy-let portfolio, especially doing like the BRR strategy, you know like upfront if you calculate your hourly rate on the
Mm.
amount of times it takes you to source the property, go through the conveyancing, raise the finance, carry out the renovation, refinance, find a tenant, get compliant, and then you look at the amount of time you put in, your hourly rate will be pennies. Like it won't even be £1 an hour. Like it'll be nothing. Um, but then the way I always looked at it was after that, year one might be very, very little, but year two is going to be £300 an hour because all you're hopefully going to do is look at your statement every month from the management agents and say, okay, brilliant, there's my rental and my mortgage is out, file it in your accounts, and away you go. So it was always much the pain point of that sacrifice, knowing that if you just keep compounding and building these, eventually you'll have that freedom you desire.
That's it. I think we had a look at kind of, when I can't remember what it was, but put something together recently. It was like, look, your work now is what's gonna dictate like your life in the future. And the fact that you were talking about recently going away, I was supposed to be in Dubai for a couple of days, ended up staying for a couple of weeks, but during that time still got the rent coming in from the buy to let portfolio. It's that your work now is what's going to pay for those 5 properties potentially that are going to allow you to just have however long it is you want to spend away.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually done a story about that a few days ago on Instagram before I came back from Cyprus. And it was quite a lot of reflection on it because it was our 10-year anniversary that we got married out in Cyprus. And I kind of reflected a lot during that week away with the family, just thinking how much has changed and the sacrifice you've made over that 10 years. But what I mean, you're not going to switch off from the business. I got a couple offers accepted for next flip projects, but one thing I did do was I pay attention to the statements coming through from the letting agents, and I think over the time that I was away, there was maybe 16 payments. I think it was. I looked at on the emails, and it just kind of hit me like, wow, this is giving you finally after 15 years of sacrifice, you've got that flexibility to look at it and go, these payments are dropping in. Most people work their asses off to get paid 12 times a year. They'll get paid monthly, and you're sitting there working, on holiday, having sacrificed a lot to get it going. Well, look at all these payments dropping in, every other day through your rental income, which, yeah, it's hard work, but the sacrifice is worth it in the end.
Yeah, so it's a good feeling. So then we see you worked offshore for a little while.
Mm.
But another thing you do outside of building your own property portfolio, I know you've got the Scottish Property Podcast.
Yeah.
With your what's his name, your business partner again?
Nick Ponte, yeah, from
Yeah,
Glasgow.
yeah, that I was on. So if you want to obviously check out that,
Check out that cool interview.
my episode, I'll try and get a link to it when we repost this. I'll put the link to
Yeah.
that episode as well, so you can check it out.
It's funny, I just met Nick through all the media Facebook group pages, maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I kind of started to take property more seriously. Like up until probably maybe around 6 years ago, it was very much the hobby on the side. You work full time, but it was just something you done continuously flipping or adding them to the portfolio. And I got to know Nick through that. So we just started the podcast. I think I'd only met him maybe once or twice in person, and we only started the podcast a couple of months before lockdown. So it gave us a nice focus, and we built a cracking community up in Scotland through it as well. It was good.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's always good. I know we spoke obviously sort of post COVID. You said potentially I'll come down and do one of your networking events.
Yeah.
Get to that, so I still am going to come down. I'm sure we'll sort that out very soon.
I saw you guys networking events as much more like my kind of thing. Alcohol and supercars the other day. There's the Savoy guys.
Yeah, it was the Savoy guys. Yeah, shout out. Yeah, really nice day out. I think the thing with networking events sometimes you just really want to just be able to just actually spend the time networking, as opposed to somebody like pitching or selling or all sorts of different stuff like that. Networking event, property people in the room, all just talking about what we all enjoy, property.
Yeah, I remember going to my first networking event. It was about 6 years ago. I was working down in Africa, and some guy handed me the popular property magazine. Shit, I'll have copies of them here. You know what I mean? The property. What's the property magazine? I can't remember what the property magazine's called. Guy handed me a copy of this magazine, and I looked at the back of it, and there's PIN networking events and progressive networking events. I was like, shit, there's networking events for property and stuff. I knew no one had done property. No one for the first 10 years was in my network that did any property. So you can imagine how lonely this was. And I remember going to the first one in Edinburgh, and I'd be the one that was like, the one that's quite sit at the back. Don't speak to anyone. Don't talk to anyone. Just don't mingle. And actually, the first guy I ever went into property business with, I met on that night. I thought, fuck, what an arrogant wanker this guy was. But we actually met literally a few weeks later, and kind of hit off because you realised that you're very, very like-minded. You had the same, similar kind of age, similar kind of desires, and someone, you realise that people actually got it. You couldn't speak to friends and family about what you were doing because they would think you were mad or you're taking risks, or they would try and put their negative thoughts on you and downplay what you were trying to do. As these people at these network events got it. So yeah, the first business partner I had was a network event. So I do love networking. I think it's a great thing for business.
Yeah, I've always been I was always rubbish with, like you said, I was similar to you, in terms of I go to a networking event, particularly before I did social media. I just go there and I think, I don't know, I don't know what I'm going to speak to anybody about. I think, because a lot of the time you hear everybody saying, I've done this, that, whatever, and you're just kind of thinking, maybe sort of start to doubt yourself a little bit and don't kind of want to put yourself out there. But I think it is really important. As much as I was bad at it, I definitely recommend, if you can, go to different types of networking events. Don't just go to one. Work out, the ones that you like, the ones that work for you. Some of them are a lot more people talking and you get to soak in information. Some of them are just more actual networking events where you go and you just meet people. But the reality is, I think, there's always going to be people that tell you why what you want to do isn't going to work. Like, I remember the first time I said I wanted to get into property, one of my, at the time, a very close friend of mine was like, I was explaining to him, it's basically, but there's already loads of people that do property. And it was like, yeah, but I'm not, in most businesses, you very rarely reinvent the wheel. In most cases, what you're doing is just fine-tuning something and finding a little niche, a little pocket, a little bit of space to operate in with the hard work and the dedication that you're going to put in, that's going to allow you to succeed in that space. You haven't got to create a brand new business all the time. Sometimes you do by default through learning, but and
everyone's going to put that negative opinion on you because that's their negative beliefs. That's their limiting beliefs in what they think is possible or what they think can be done, or and that's probably why I never spoke to anyone about what I did in property. And I remember posting, probably the first thing I posted on Facebook maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I started to build up the social media presence, and one of the guys that I went to school with, trained in martial arts for like 15, 16 years, he was like, I didn't know you had property. I was like, yeah, I think I had a portfolio maybe like 9 or 10 at the time. He's like, yeah, I've got like a handful, and he was like, what? I never knew it. I didn't tell no one, no one else, because I just thought, what's the point? I'm going to hear your negative opinion, like listening to your mum or your parents or someone that's like, oh no, son, you better watch what you're doing. They're talking from a place of not of hate, just of like they don't want to make you make a mistake or lose, but that's their beliefs, not your beliefs.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's always a balance of trying to find,
the positives. I didn't talk about it, probably not even for that reason. Not that like I thought people would be negative, but just didn't talk about it because in my head it was just like it was just my job. So in the same way, you know, necessarily the guy that's a butcher doesn't come home and talks to everybody about all of the meat that he sold. I wasn't coming home talking about, you know, all of the property. But I think the thing with property is because everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people are really interested in it because it's something we all understand. Everybody needs somewhere to live. It's tangible. You can touch it. So people are actually really interested, and it's like even just going out. Like I mentioned, I was away over the weekend, and people coming up to me in a club and wanting to talk about their issue with their mortgage, like in a club with the music pounding. I'm like, I don't think it's the right time, but it's funny because people are genuinely really, really interested.
Yeah, I know. Like you say, it's something that everyone kind of understands. Whether they have rented a property, bought a property, lived. You know, everyone's had a situation with property that they can relate to, so they think they can, you know, talk to it. But yeah, it's good. I mean, I suppose that's how we build our brand, build our business, is kind of putting out there and having these conversations with different people as well.
Yeah, so then the next thing I wanted to touch on is obviously after working in the offshore industry, I guess you'd seen a specific niche that potentially people were earning, you know, significant sums of money, but weren't necessarily putting it to the best use. So you then, since then, effectively started to help people. Is it build a portfolio, those that are working offshore, or what is it exactly the service that you provide?
Yeah, so when I was working offshore, like you saw a lot of guys that would earn a lot of money, but you'd sacrifice a hell of a lot of time offshore. You'd miss so much family events, you miss so much, you know, weddings, funerals, births, you name it, you're away from it. Like it'll land when you're away. And I never ever saw any happy endings because no one can ever leave, you know, the 150 grand a year job and then come back to make 30 grand a year on shore. The lifestyle is going to increase for that. So there was no one was banking anything, no one was putting away, no one was building anything for the future. They were just, oh, I've got a Range Rover Sport, come back. Oh, the wife's got a Range Rover Sport. Oh, we're going to go on this type of holiday, and the lifestyle just kept increasing to the point where you could never go back and just work on shore. And you'd always see the guys that were offshore that would be divorced or, you know, estranged from their different marriages and not good relationship with their kids because they weren't around and stuff like that. And I thought, I don't want to get sucked into this trap and stay here. And myself and my wife, we tried for years to have my daughter through IVF, and it was something clicked the minute she was born. I instantly said, I'm not going back offshore. I'm not going away. And my wife's like, what do you mean you're not going away? She says, fuck it. I love what I do in property. I'm going to just give this a bash. And you know, pretty much 2 months after my daughter was born, I'd already put in for redundancy and took a redundancy in the oil and gas industry. So fast, you know, for me building my business for the last 4 or 5 years out of that time, coming out of lockdown, it was just that kind of bit of resetting that the few weeks, and I thought, you know what, I started a mastermind group about 2 or 3 months before lockdown, and it was a way for me, basically, you know, I've got a group of friends and people in my community and people that I can help, you know, sit around with meet them for a pizza once a month and have a beer, and we would just chat properly, and I'd get their goals and their aspirations, and I'd help them to have a WhatsApp chat and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed seeing the guys get results. And one of the particular one was a guy I'd met on a rig, you know, probably 8 or 9 years ago, and he'd been offshore since he was 18, earning a good salary. But I mean, he was almost turning 40. He'd been away. He'd been pretty much 9.5 to 10 years of his life he had missed out on already, and he'd been offshore that long. But what I really liked about him was he didn't fall into the trap of most other people. He drove about in a kind of banging a car, had paid off his mortgage, had bought a flat, so I kind of understood it. So it was great to work with guys like that could make good salaries, so fast forward into the start of lockdown, I thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to try and help people. So when I started the podcast with Nick, we had this kind of, you know, this heated debate about property education, and a lot of people hate it and they slate it and stuff like that. And I was probably a bit one of them, thinking that the market was full of kind of crooks, the people that didn't really do it. I didn't like the moral standing off it, the fact they didn't do it properly, but they taught it. But to get you sucked in, they taught this dream lifestyle of how easy it is, and you know, you could quit your job in 30 days or whatever the tagline was, or you could be the millionaire within fucking 2 minutes, whatever nonsense it was. And the fact that, you know, they charged, you know, tens of thousands of pounds, and in Scotland, that's your first deposit for your BRR to get going. So if you take away that in education, you have appreciate education, but I thought there's a couple of holes that I thought was missing. So I was like, right, here we go. I'm going to be one of the most hated people in Scotland, and I'm going to start a property workshop. So I done a 2-day event, and it was like 995. It was like $1,000. I was like, I'm going to use everything that I've done just based on flips and building a buy-to-let portfolio. The 2 strategies I do, this is what I do, and it was like spent 2 days just going through it, and I attracted a lot of offshore guys to this, obviously because of my social media profile and stuff, and I got such a buzz. It was kind of just a COVID fill-in thing, thinking I'll do this a few times throughout COVID. It'll be nice for a bit of cash flow. It'll help me kind of reset while things were getting stalled. But I loved it. I thought it was great to help people, because not only that, but selfishly for my business, if I'm putting it out there and spending, it's now 3 days. If I'm spending 3 days and 10 people, I actually get to know people quite a lot. So if we get on well and they come and bring me a deal, or they bring me some money, we end up doing business with a lot of people that come off the back of it. So you know that they've kind of got the right education, they know what they're doing, they go away and find a deal, they come along. And I've the amount of times I've done flip projects with guys, I've came straight off the workshop, found a flip, I'm like, do you know what, I'm not quite confident in doing it, I get what you've taught me, I found it, I'm still don't want to go through the big renovation project. They'll come on board and we'll do a joint venture on a flip. And I love it. It just builds your network up more and more as well.
Yeah, no, that's all good. I mean, that's the reason I think a lot of people, or that's the reason you can be good at something. If you see something but can find a way potentially you can do it better, and also have an understanding of the people that you want to work with. I think the fact that you've got a specific niche that you've worked with, the offshore market, you understand that, in terms of that, you do have the potential to earn massive amounts of money, but at the same time, you also maybe lack the time, you may be lacking an element of expertise. Even when you are back, on the mainland, you never want to go and see friends and family. You don't really maybe want to be focusing on being busy with all these other things like property investments.
Yeah.
You can provide more hands-off.
And that's something I offer the guys as well that come on the workshop, because, like you say, if they're going to work away for 6 months of the year, they might want to come and learn how to do this, but they might not necessarily want to put the time in at the back end of it and go. They might try it for a month or two and they'll trip back and get a bit disheartened because they've not got a deal over the line. So a lot of times it adds to the network of people that have came on, and then I'll say, look, I've got excess deals in Aberdeen, so I end up having to working with a kind of handful of investors that invest remotely from all over the UK that will buy deals off me that I'm going to build my portfolio in Aberdeen and continue to do so. And so they'll end up just end up sourcing for them as well. So yeah, you can provide that hands-off service to people that maybe they understand that they've learned about it, but they're like, you know what, it's too much effort work for me. I'll keep making my big bucks offshore. Can you, there's a few grand, find me a good deal. So yeah, it does work hand in hand.
Nice. That's good. So for them people, if they aren't already following you, you should make sure they go and find you, check out your socials. Do you have any events coming up anytime soon?
Yeah, one in June, one at the end of June. There's a few places left on that. I only do 3 a year. I try and just kind of balance it. Since my wee girl went to school in August, I kind of just try to balance them right before our school holidays. So I've kind of lined them up 3 throughout the whole year. So I'm enjoying it. It's good. And I've changed the locations about this time, because since we've been now out of lockdown, I did one in Aberdeen at the start of the year. I'm doing one in Edinburgh in June, and I'm doing one in Glasgow in September. So I'll cap the 3. So it's quite cool.
Nice. So for everyone that's potentially looking at maybe investing in different areas in Scotland, or just understanding different markets across the UK, that's definitely one to check out. Much appreciate you coming on today and spending your Sunday with us. It's always appreciated. We are going to be back next week, each and every Sunday, with an amazing special guest to discuss all things property. If you haven't already, make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube. Make sure you're following myself. Make sure you're following the guests. Check us out next week, and we'll be back. Appreciate you, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Appreciate it, mate. Remember, I want the invite for the networking event down in London again next time.
I will, but I want you to bring me one of those. I saw it when I was out, and I was like, I still need to try one of these, the deep fried Scottish pizza.
Oh, God. My wife likes them, actually.
Yeah, the heart attack. I want to try one of them. Bring me a heart attack, and I'll make sure I get you an invite to the next networking event.
No problem, mate. Good to see you. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Cheers.